Welcome to the Motor Asha podcast. On this episode, we talk to Zain from Zenngine on suspension setup and its components. Hi, Zain. Welcome to the Motor Asha podcast.
Hi, Syed.
Hi, it's always good to have people who are on the field, tinkering with motorcycles, knowing what they're doing on our podcast. So I think what I'll do is I'll let's get to know Zen better from Zenngine. So you can probably introduce yourself, what you do, and how you got into
Right,
the garage that you're at right now.
right. It's a pleasure to be here, firstly. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
So, I finished my engineering in the early half of this decade. Came back to the country, worked in a few jobs for a while, got my first motorcycle not that long ago.
Yeah.
I was always a car guy from the very beginning, but pretty soon realized that performance bikes are a lot cheaper to buy and maintain than performance cars.
Yeah.
And all I was passionate about was, engines and machines and, how they work. And the engineering that goes into a performance motorcycle's engine is fascinating.
Yeah.
So I got into performance motorcycles, got my first bike, and I'm a very hands-on kind of guy.
Yeah.
So, first service, everything was done by me, by myself.
Yeah.
And then I started working part-time for Crossroad, the biker stop that's in Mumbai. They wanted someone who could do installations on the big bikes like the Tigers and so on and so forth. And me having my engineering background internationally really helped maintain the standard. So I started working part-time. Eventually realized that, I'm enjoying my part-time weekends way more than my weekday job.
Wow.
And decided to just take the plunge and quit my job and start my own business.
Wow.
So that's how I got into the garage
Yeah.
field.
So what you're doing is something that you understand and you're doing it. You're not one of those guys who just, okay, let's just try to fix it, and then you leave it. So you're probably putting some science to it, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. So I have a lot of theoretical background where I come from. So during my degree, when we were studying in the UK, we had a lot of opportunity to explore and find out how machines actually work.
Yeah.
Contrast that to some other universities out here where, they're just giving you theoretical things to, learn and by heart and put in an exam paper. We had a lot of opportunity out there to learn.
Yeah.
And we still learn every day, to be honest. I mean, the day I started my garage, I still learn about each and every motorcycle, how it works, but I have a very good theoretical background.
Yeah.
Plus, I have a good amount of knowledge as to where to get the correct information from.
Got it.
Which is the biggest thing in the current internet age.
Yeah.
There is a lot of information out there, but what do you trust? Where do you get that information from?
Yeah. So
That's what matters.
Are you seeing motorcyclists more aware of what it is? Like generally they come to you and, do they know what they are, or is it a case of educating them, and is there a lot of knowledge imparting that happens?
Oh, there's a massive demand for knowledge. There's a massive demand as well as requirement for knowledge. So people are starting to learn slowly and steadily, but what I am seeing is because of the internet age, there's as much as information is growing, so is misinformation along with it.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing, so for example, this podcast, and there are other people out there who are building similar communities to spread knowledge out there. But because of the modern YouTube revolution, pretty much anyone can just go out there, make a video about information and put it out there, which may or may not be correct.
Yeah, got it.
It is growing, but the market definitely needs a lot more information amongst the riders.
Yeah, I mean that's why we've decided that we're going to have people on the ground to talk about it rather than, I mean, there's a lot of people who look at us. And I'll give you a simple example of oil. I know you go through it. I mean, day in, day out.
Yes.
There's a lot of people who come to us and say, "Hey, listen, will this oil, make my bike run smoother?"
Right.
That is such a weak question to ask,
Exactly. I mean, what oil are you comparing it to? What oil are you running in your current motorcycle? There are so many questions to answer in that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I'll tell you what, we had you, we thought about it and we said, let's get Zain to talk about suspensions.
Brilliant.
What happens usually is, our topics are very, on a weekly basis, there's random topics that get picked up. And I remember you on one of your Instagram stories trying to explain to somebody, rebound and compression and
Yeah.
all those likes. And I kept thinking, I was like, you know what? It's not as simple as being, on a 5 second or 3 second story that somebody would go back and read it. So I thought,
Absolutely.
let's
Yeah.
get you on.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, I'll shoot a few questions that I have, and maybe we
Okay.
can get on to some theory
Yeah.
with it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, my first question is, what are the basic components of suspensions? And let's go a little deeper because I think most of our listeners are people who've got adjustable suspensions. So I'm gonna get into that part of it.
Right.
What are the components of an adjustable suspension? Rather, I feel that even a non-adjustable suspension has those components, but you can't adjust it. So what are those
Absolutely.
3, 4 components that are there? And then we'll get into uh, making it suit you.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
so shoot off. I mean, that's something that I'll leave it to you now to go ahead with.
Okay. So your front and rear suspension, basically, if I broadly categorize them, have the same components, just in different orientations. Okay. So to start with, the first thing that we need is a spring, which allows the wheel to move with the ground surface and not let it lose contact with the ground. That's the primary function of the suspension. It's not to give you comfort. It's to make sure that the wheel has optimum contact with the ground at all times.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have your spring, which is the main load carrying thing. You have your spring, and then you have your damping system,
Mm.
which has the hydraulic component to it.
Yeah.
In the hydraulic component, you've got two different systems. You've got a rebound system and you've got a compression system,
Mm.
right? Some systems may have them split into high speed, low speed, or some system may have them just as rebound and compression,
Yeah.
right? But those are your broadly categorized adjusters that you may get. If you go into extreme adjustable components, then you also get something called as a length adjustment of the rear shock,
Mm. Mm.
which changes the actual length of the shock change, which drastically impacts your ride height and swing arm angle and all of those things. But
Mm.
for you to get a good adjustment on your motorcycle, you need just these three components. So you need to set your preload, which will adjust your spring. You need to set your damping correctly, which is rebound and compression.
Yeah.
If you have high speed and low speed, you can do that. But if you have these three components set up front and back balanced well, you can have a motorcycle which is very well set up.
Yeah. Okay. So let's step back. I'm going to step back.
Okay.
What is compression for a
Okay.
layman? Like if I was to hold this, one shock in my
Mm-hmm.
hand, what does my compression do? What does my rebound do? And what
Mm-hmm.
does my preload do?
Okay. Okay. So we'll start with damping first. It's a little bit more easier to understand than preload.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions about preload. So
Mm.
if you have ever seen a small spring, right, something that may come out of a pen,
Yeah.
okay, and if you compress it or if it falls down, what you will see is it tends to oscillate.
Yeah.
You compress it, you leave it, and then it's like a pogo stick. It goes, up and down, up and down, up and down. You
Yeah.
don't want that to happen on a motorcycle. You want your motorcycle to remain stable
Mm.
at all times, for you to have the optimum feel, for the tires to have the optimum grip, right? That's what the hydraulic system does. That's what compression and rebound do. Okay. Now, when we go through a bump, our suspension compresses, right?
Yeah.
How fast it compresses is controlled by your compression damping,
Yeah. Good.
right? When it's compressed, naturally, because of the spring force, the compression wants to spring back out,
Mm.
right? And the bump is over, so the wheel is going to go back into its own place. How fast it springs back is controlled by a rebound damping,
Got it. Got it.
right? So if someone wants a depth understanding to it, there's a video on YouTube which was made in the early 1950s by Chevrolet,
Okay. Oh.
when they and they have a lot of videos about monolink suspension and multi-link suspension and all of them, but they have a graph where they can show, okay, what happens with just a spring, what
Mm.
happens with no spring, what happens with spring plus damping,
Yeah.
and you can see the movement of the wheel on the graph, and it's very clear what it does. So that will give you a perfect understanding of anyone who wants to understand this in depth. But that's what compression and rebound generally do. It controls the movement of the suspension.
Yeah. So does that? I mean, I had somebody, funny enough, actually ask me a question. Why are we selling suspension oils? Why does, where does that oil go? So
Exactly.
probably
Right.
that's probably that should tie into your answer right now.
Exactly. So any hydraulic system, these hydraulic systems use oil,
Yeah.
right? Your adjustable suspensions, you have to think of them as a tap. Okay. You have a tap through which the oil flows. You close the tap more, the oil flow is going to reduce,
Got it. Yeah.
right? And if that's going to reduce, it's going to make the velocity of the suspension slower.
Got it. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yes.
Cool. So compression you've got covered. Rebound you've got covered. I mean, let's get to preload. There's always a very mythical question, and it keeps coming
Yeah.
up every time. If I preload my spring, it's going to make my rear really hard.
Right. So
Yeah.
one thing we have to keep in mind is that the spring rate, which is the force that the spring applies, stays constant always, right?
Mm.
Whatever spring is in the bike, that rate stays constant. That does not change. So when you go over a bump, the force that the spring is going to apply is going to stay the same. It's not going to change massively by changing preload, right?
Yeah.
What does change is, so with every millimeter of compression of the spring, there's a little bit more force which is applied. Let's assume we have 100 Newton per millimeter spring. So
Mm.
with every millimeter of compression, I'm adding 100 Newtons of force.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. So if I preload the spring to 5 millimeters, right, I have 500 Newtons of force already on the shock.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. So what we do with preload adjustment, and this is a good question because this is the first thing that you have to do out of the showroom floor immediately,
Mm. Yeah.
right? And nowadays, most motorcycles, even in the lower middle segment, thankfully are getting preload adjustments,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So first thing you do is set your preload, which sets your sag. Now, sag is how much the bike compresses in the rider's and the bike's own weight. Okay. So you sit on the motorcycle, how much does the bike compress with your weight on the motorcycle?
Mm.
We want that to be somewhere in the 30% range of the total suspension travel,
Got it. Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Now that is adjusted by preload.
Mm.
Okay. So let's say I'm a heavy sort of rider. I'm 100 kilos. I weigh 100 kilos. Okay. When I sit on the motorcycle, and if we assume the same spring, I have about 500 newtons of force pushing me back up,
Yeah.
right? That may not be enough for me to be in the correct range. I may be, 50% in the suspension travel range. So what I do, I add 5 mm of preload, which makes the initial force
Mm.
to 1000 newtons, which may bring me back in range, right?
Yeah.
Now, when I go over a bump and the suspension compresses more, the amount of force that is added is always going to be the same because that is defined by the spring.
Got it. Yeah.
My initial force is higher. I agree to that.
Mm.
That just makes sure that you're sitting right on the bike. The bike is straight. That just makes sure that. But when you go over a bump,
Mm.
the amount of force that is added by the spring is going to stay the same.
Yeah.
Right? So if I am at no preload, right, I have 0 newtons going in the spring.
Mm.
I
Mm.
go over a bump which compresses the suspension by 10 mm, let's say. So 1000 newtons of force is exerted.
Yeah.
Correct?
Got it.
If I'm at 10 mm of preload,
Mm.
okay, 1000 newtons of force is already exerted when I'm sitting on the motorcycle. When I go over a bump, 10 mm of compression happens. I still get added only 1000 more newtons. Yes, the total is 2000, I agree, but the 1000 is already accommodated with your weight.
Yeah.
The additional force is only 1000 newtons again.
Mm. Got it. Yeah.
Correct? So that's a misconception that, making my adding preload is going to make my spring stiffer.
Yeah. So you're saying if you are in that range of the 30%, sag using
Mm-hmm.
preload,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how the bike was, that's how engineers have made the bike to run at that suspension. So that is where exactly you should be. And that doesn't matter, that won't matter to you because it's not going to make your bike harder or softer. Unless you've preloaded it way too much. Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay.
So with SAG, there are a few things that we need to look at. Yes, we need to be in the 30% range, no question. If you're on an off-road motorcycle, then 30% is going to be higher. If you're on a track motorcycle, 30% generally accounts to about 30 mm or 30 to 40 mm of sag. Okay, but what we have to keep in mind is that there are two components of sag. One, there's the rider sag, okay, and two, there's static sag. So what's the difference? Okay, so one, static sag is how much does the bike compress on its own weight. No one is sitting on the motorcycle. If I pick the bike up off the side stand, how much is the compression by the bike's own weight on the rear shock or on the front forks? Okay, that's static sag. Then you have rider sag, right? So when I sit on the motorcycle,
so how much is static sag?
Yeah. So this varies depending on where you ride. Okay. When I am at the racetrack, I am looking at a minimum of 5 mm of static sag. That is absolutely mandatory. I need a minimum of 5 mm of static sag. Ideally, I would like it to be between 5 and 10 mm of static sag at the racetrack. All right. In the off-road scenario, that will have to be much more higher. Right. But that is, so static sag is somewhere between 5 to 7% of your total suspension travel. Rough numbers. So now what happens is, let's say I'm a heavy rider, I'm 110, 120 kilos, right? And this has happened to me with a lot of my clients. I'm 110, 120 kilos, and I've got a bike which is not designed for a 120 kilo rider, obviously, right? Now I jack up the preload all the way to get to the correct sag values. I can do that, yes. But when I do that, my static sag goes away completely. Right? When my static sag completely goes away, that is going to make my bike unbearably painful to ride. It's very difficult for me to explain why on a call.
So it just keeps throwing you off, right? That's what it's going to keep doing.
Exactly. So as soon as you go over a bump, your butt is going to come off the seat because there's no room for the suspension to expand anymore.
Got it.
Right? It's going to throw you off the seat, and then when you land back, it's going to be a hard thud that's going to go through your spine.
So at any time, you've got to have that, 5 to 10 mm.
You absolutely need to do.
Play that's a play that you need to keep.
If you have to compromise on your total sag value to get that 5 mm of sag, that is okay, till the time you get a new spring. You need to get a stiffer spring.
That's the option that you're saying.
Yes.
That is the only option.
That is the only option, yes.
Okay, so here's a question for you. I bring you a bike with a total rear travel of 180 mm.
Okay.
How do I measure where my sag has to be? One. I mean, it's difficult to when there's no. I mean, I can't, being on an audio, but how do I measure that? And what is my next step to setting it right?
Right. Okay. So you bring me a bike with 180 mm of suspension travel, right?
Yes.
We always start with the rear suspension because the rider's weight is predominantly on the rear suspension on most motorcycles. We always set the rear suspension first, and then we accommodate the front accordingly. Okay. So what you do is you want the bike upright, right? You measure from a fixed point, which can be the ground, which can be the rim, which can be the rear axle, because those things are not going to move. Those are unsprung mass, right? So those things are not going to move. You measure from there to any fixed point on the motorcycle, which is sprung. So that can be, your rear grab rails, your rear tail light, any sticker at the rear of the bike, which is going to move. Okay. You measure that distance. That will be your first reference marker. That distance doesn't really matter. It's just a reference marker. You measure with the rear of the bike completely lifted up. So you need a friend to help you. So you need the rear of the bike completely lifted up, which will be your total travel, right? Without the wheel coming off the ground. So that's the first reference. I've got my total travel. Okay, this is the height at which with fully extended. That's my total value of whatever mm. Let's say it's 500 mm from the ground. Okay. Now I leave the motorcycle. No one is sitting on the bike. The bike is upright. The bike is going to fall down a little bit. Okay. I measure. Okay. What is that value now? Right. Now that difference needs to be noted. So let's say that was 500. Now it is 450. So what I'm looking at is about a 50 mm. About 5 mm. So that is my static sag.
Got it.
Right. Then I make the rider sit on it. The rider sits on it, and then I measure it again. Okay, how much does it get added? Okay, it's about 40 lower now. About 4 centimeters, 40 lower. So that is 40 40 plus 5 is about 45
Yeah.
That's my total sag value. This is the easiest and the least complicated way to do it. There's a much more complicated, more precise way to do it where stiction comes into the picture and averaging comes into the picture. I don't think we'll get into that. If you want, that precise sag values, get yourself to an expert.
Yeah. Got it. Cool.
Right? But that's the way how you measure sag. And then you get that number, you see if it's in the 30 to 40% range of my total suspension travel. And then if it is not, you go to something which is called a spring collar. Most bikes have a spring collar now. Multiple different ways of adjustment. You may have a ramp adjuster or you may have a double-threaded nut adjuster.
Yeah.
Either ways, you move that collar one way, which is going to compress your spring. You move that collar the other way, it's going to uncompress your spring. If your sag value is too high, it's about 50-60%, you compress the spring.
Yeah. Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
Do it one step at a time in a ramp adjuster. Do it one turn or two turns at a time in a threaded adjuster.
Yeah.
If the sag value is too low, it's less than 30%, then you uncompress the spring. Right? And that takes preload off, and then you repeat this process till you are in the 30 to 40% range.
Yeah.
While maintaining static.
Yeah. So this, what you said means that every time I load my bike up with a pillion or I'm loading more weight with luggage, my suspension sag, my sag has to be adjusted every time then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you want a bike that handles exactly the same every time you ride it, irrespective of whether you have luggage or whether you have a pillion, the suspension has to be adjusted, and that is precisely why remote preload adjusters were invented.
Yeah, got it. So it's a very important part of your bike.
Yes, very.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to take too much time on compression and rebound because I know it's probably a more it's a more varied, adjustable thing. So I'll get you only to talk about how do you adjust and what do I look out for when I'm adjusting my rebound dampers and my compression dampers.
Right. So what you want to do is I'm going to assume a motorcycle that is not high speed, low speed compression, simpler to understand.
Yeah.
Second, I'm going to assume a motorcycle whose front forks are well serviced. They don't have 10 years old oil or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
And it's the right viscosity and the right amount of oil in the forks.
Yeah.
Okay? Once we have that, what we are looking at is if you have separate function forks, right? Separate function forks means one fork has compression, the other fork has rebound. Okay? The first thing that I would do is I would take a cable tie and I would put it on the fork, on the sliding part of the fork.
Yeah.
So on the chrome side, I would put a cable tie, right? After I come back from a ride, I look where that cable tie is. Is it in the top 20%? Is it in the bottom 20%? Is it in the middle area? Where is it? Okay. If it is at the bottom, that means you're bottoming out your front suspension. Not good. If it is at the top, that means you're not using full suspension travel. Again, not good.
Yeah.
Right? This gives you an indication to adjust your compression damping. If you are anywhere outside of the middle area, right, for a layman, you need to go and get your compression damping adjusted.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing that is rebound. Now, rebound changes massively when you go from a track bike or a street bike to an off-road motorcycle.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm assuming that the majority of the people listening are majority of them are going to be street riders, right?
Yeah.
So what we are looking at is that you take the motorcycle off the side stand, not sitting on the bike. You're holding it with the handlebars, and you pump the handlebar. Let it go. Just pump it down, let it go. Right? When that happens, does the bike pogo a lot? Like, does it go up, down again, down again? If it does that a lot, your rebound needs to be adjusted.
Yeah.
Okay. The second thing that you can do with the rear is you sit on the motorcycle, let someone else compress the rear and let it go. And when the bike comes back up, are you thrown off the seat?
Yeah.
If you're thrown off the seat massively, okay, you need to look at your rebound adjusters.
Yeah.
So these are good signs that someone sitting at home can do to figure out, okay, is my suspension working in the right range, or do I need to have it looked by someone to get it working properly?
Yeah. But before that, they should make sure that they get them markings and how many adjusters from where they were noted down, right? That's what you're trying to say.
So what I would do is, the first thing I would do is I would make sure that, okay, the owner needs to know that, okay, is my suspension working correctly or not? Once we know that, okay, it's not working correctly, and then we go into adjusting it, that is when we look into, okay, where are the adjusters? What turns are they at? What do I do with them? Then we can get into that. But once we know that, okay, this is the issue, then we need to look at, okay, how do we adjust it?
Yeah. Yeah. I got it. So I had a very interesting fellow this morning who came to me and he said, "Hey, I followed your rebound and compression adjusters, but my hands have started hurting me." So I looked at him and said, "You should not be following what adjusters I have been, because, like you said, I think it's such a variable thing. It's so different for everybody. The kind of speed you're riding, the kind of terrain that you're riding. I mean,
Absolutely.
so yeah.
For me, in my experience, what happens is when someone comes in for a suspension adjustment, I spend about 20-25 minutes just talking to them.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes adjusting.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is the funny thing is, when I got into it, I kept adjusting almost every day where I was going, and it would, I mean, it's endless.
Yeah.
You can just keep adjusting and, come back on a flat surface, you adjust it again because you feel that the right way should be moving. But, I understand. I think it's such a vast topic that people can keep reading and
Absolutely.
adjusting.
So what I would like to point out is, because there's one misconception that is there, that the company has given certain settings and they must have thought of something when they've given it. Why do we need to change it?
Yeah.
Right. So the tackle to that is that the company has given a compromise. It is not suited for you. The company designs a motorcycle that can fit 70% of the mass majority where they're selling the motorcycle. Right? It is not perfectly suited to you. It is not perfectly suited for anyone. It's a compromise for the 70% of the people who are going to buy the motorcycle.
Yeah.
Right? The second thing is, let's assume that you are scared of fiddling with something, making the bike worse or something, right? Whatever adjustments you do on the motorcycle, you can always turn them back to stock.
Yeah. Got it.
Even if you don't note them down, your owner's manual will have all of the stock settings.
Yeah.
Right? It has details of how do you adjust the suspension.
Yeah.
No matter what bike you have, your owner's manual has all of those details. Right? So if anyone is willing to, tinker, and I encourage them to do so, if anyone is willing to tinker, you read through your owner's manual very well. You will know where all the adjusters are. You will know what the total limit of the adjusters are. You will know how to turn the adjuster and what to do with it. Because I cannot get into it, because each and every motorcycle is going to be different.
Yeah.
Every adjuster is going to be different.
Yeah.
So if we discuss each and every motorcycle, we'll need a week or something.
Got it.
Right. So your owner's manual is your best friend. If you want to adjust suspension, go through it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what is going to happen. You will have a lot of people wherever you are who will know a little bit about suspension. So in Mumbai, I'm there. Pune, there's Kunal from Slipstream. Bangalore, there's Indy Motard. Chennai, there's Motor Dynamics. You can just call them up. Listen, I'm trying to tinker, and all of these are excellent people. I'm trying to tinker around with my suspension. I'm trying to do this. What do you think? Should I do it? Should I do this? Should I do that? And they'll help you out.
Yeah.
Right? Go through the owner's manual, see what you want to do, and then, talk to a few people, get into adjusting. If you don't like it, turn it back.
Yeah.
There's no harm.
Yeah. Cool. So I've got two last quick questions for you, Zain. One, the compromise that you're saying, the whole adjustability, what is the weight range that an OEM generally looks at? And when should someone start looking at options as changing your springs? So is there a weight range that they look at? Is it so is there one that somebody should be looking at?
Yeah. So um, the weight range that the manufacturers look at varies slightly going from the Western countries to the Eastern countries. So Japanese tend to steer slightly towards lighter riders.
Yeah.
So Jap bikes are mostly suited for about 70 kgs to 90 kgs or 95 kgs fully geared up rider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas if you go to the American, which is the Harley Davidsons and the Indians, they are more suited towards, 75 kgs to about 105 kgs,
Yeah.
right? So that's where the range is. And the Italian motorcycles are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So basically the suspension is set. I mean, the suspension adjustability and range is set for that much. The preload, everything is set for those kind of weighted riders, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. My last question to you. How
Mhm.
often should I be changing my fork oil?
Right. Okay. So the short answer to that, and the short answer to that, I'll give a short and a long answer. The short answer to me as a track rider who does a lot of track days, I do them every other track day.
Yeah.
So
The other track days. Oh, okay.
last track day I did not change my fork oil. I'm going again this month. I'm changing my fork oil right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every other track day I change my fork oil. That makes sure that every time I'm at the track, my handling stays consistent.
Hmm. Got it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Now the long answer to that is on our roads, which are not roads technically,
Yeah.
your folks do a lot of work,
Yeah.
right? More than you can imagine, more so than any of the European or American countries out there, right?
Hmm.
So what I generally make sure that you do is every 10,000 kilometers, a maximum of 10,000 kilometers, get your forks oil changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're using good premium synthetic oil, like I use Maxima or Liquimoly, those oils you don't need to worry a lot about the duration. Like it's been a year since I've changed oil, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter as much unless and until 2 years, 3 years down the line,
Yeah.
right? But 10,000 kilometers, your fork oil has to be changed. There are a lot of issues that can happen if that is not done. I've had oil seals break. I've had bushes which are stuck in the forks, which are a pain to get out.
Hmm.
The fork oil itself refuses to come out because it has become so sludgy and so this, and I keep uploading these on my stories. Every time I get a worst case scenario that okay, I had a bad oil last time, but this has beaten it, so I upload this. Okay, new personal best
Yeah.
sort of a thing. So
Yeah.
that
But,
that
I'm surprised. I'm surprised to see such folks. And the funny thing is, I mean, till the time that I opened my own fork and saw the kind of sludge and the dirt that was
yeah
inside, I was like,
yeah.
how did this go inside? Like,
Right. So
yeah,
there's a difference between the forks and the shock fluid.
yeah,
There's a massive difference why you do forks much more than your rear shock fluid,
yeah.
right? The massive difference is that your shock has an external spring,
Mm,
whereas the forks have an internal spring,
yeah, yeah,
right? When you compress a spring, the spring just does not go straight down. It wants to buckle, weave, and go in each and every direction wherever it can release stress.
yeah,
So when your forks compress, your springs compress and buckle and weave and hit the fork pipe,
yeah,
right? And in that motion of up and down while it's hitting the fork pipe, there's a lot of friction, that's a lot of metal shavings coming off, right? And all of that goes into your fork oil. So every 10,000 kilometers when you take your fork oil out, you
mm.
are going to see nice shiny silver sort of paint coming on that you wish your bike would be painted in, right? So all of that silvery paint comes from these metal shavings.
Yeah,
If if apart from that, if you see sludge, if you see semi-solid particles, that's your oil which has degraded.
mm,
You are not using a fully synthetic oil, and that oil has degraded way beyond its capacity.
yeah,
Right? That is not an issue when she use a synthetic oil.
yeah. Got it. All right, good. I mean, I think there's a lot of learnings that you and I take away from this podcast. Although I keep opening my forks quite often, but there's some things that you don't really expect to come out out of the
Right.
fork.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
no,
Right.
man, good stuff. Thank you so much for being on this
Most
podcast.
welcome. Thank you for having me. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
yeah, cool. Thanks so much, guys. If you want to get any of your fork suspension questions answered, Call up Zen. He's on Instagram as the Zenngine. Is that right, Zen?
Yep.
Yeah. Get in touch with him. He's got some interesting videos and stories that he keeps posting out of people not doing the right thing with their bike.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Thanks so much, man. Yeah.
Thank you.
And catch up with you soon.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. I want to hear your stories, your motorcycle experiences, what you've been doing, and how motorcycles have made your life better. So if you have something to say, DM us on Instagram, and I'll be more than happy to get you on this podcast.